We are getting some absolutely crazy card buffs. There are over 20 buffs in this video to cover hitting Hearthstone today. And that includes Halkias here behind me getting a major buff, just getting stealth, just getting an entire new keyword added on, which we'll talk about here more in a second. But just to recap, if you weren't here for the previous video, I covered these cards that got kind of leaked by Blizzard a little early, that also got the top row there got nerfed in one way or another. Some big changes to like Snowfall Guardian, Celestial Alignment, Vial Library, I think all pretty welcome changes. And then we had a couple buffs teased as well, with Edwin going to 3 mana 3/3 and Relic Vault going to 2 mana. But man, that was not the end of the buffs. Those were all the nerfs, but there are another 20 buffed cards to talk through. So let's go ahead and jump into all of these crazy changes. Big stuff for Paladin, Warrior, Rogue, Demon Hunter got some huge changes, so a lot of things to talk about. Let's kick it off first off here though with Halkias, since I teased this one already. Halkias is now going to get stealth. Also a little bit of a wording change, which as far as I can tell isn't going to change the functionality of the card. He's still going to work the same way. They just needed to make his text fit a little more tidy when squeezing the stealth keyword in there. But of course, stealth is really going to help this card a lot, because part of the problem now was you could plop down Halkias and you had to already have a secret in play if you wanted him to, hop onto that secret with his death rattle. There was still some risk your opponent could dismantle the secret before killing Halkias, but it was still this really awkward line where you had to have the secret ready to go, and sometimes that just didn't work out well. Now that Halkias has stealth, you can play Halkias preemptively. He's probably going to chill on board rather safely, being that he's a stealth minion. Then on the following turn, when he's ready to attack, you can drop the secret and know that you're going to have a secret on board, then say trade Halkias in and get another Halkias back once your secret activates with stealth as well, and keep this chain of Halkias going really far more reliably than I think you could in the past. And then of course sometimes too, just a 5/4 with stealth might just be hitting face a fair bit too, and then leaving that problem for your opponent to solve, still retaining that value he already had, which was awkward and hard to use. So you've added this like layer of consistency and threat to Halkias that didn't exist. I think this makes the card dramatically better. The Rogue Secret package is still a little iffy, is going to be the big problem here. Are the Rogue Secrets worth it for Halkias? He's way better in that context, but that context might still suffer just a little. So next up here, let's talk about Magnifying Glaive, because I can't believe this one's getting buffed. This is one of the most hyped up cards pre-expansion. I still think it seems insane. So much card draw baked into a weapon here, potentially. And now it's going to have 3 attack instead of 2, so it's even more aggressive. Better at taking trades on turn 3. Can just push some extra damage face. That's great for Demon Hunter, of course, and still has all that crazy card draw baked into it as well. I always thought Magnifying Glaive was like gonna be the standout card in this archetype, but the rest of the stuff wasn't quite strong enough, so it seemed like Magnifying Glaive just didn't get any play. Demon Hunter's been terrible, so it's a little nerve-wracking to see this get buffed alongside a lot of other Demon Hunter stuff as well, because now what might happen is this could be a really crazy powerful card in an archetype that's getting additional support. That's kind of scary. We'll have to see how it goes, but this one already seemed like it had a lot of latent potential, just waiting for the deck to kind of be propped up around it. And now that the deck is getting propped up and this gets stronger, that's a scary combination for me. So next up here, we have the Bibliomite getting a little bonus, going from a 4/4 to a 5/4 in this case. So a little bit of extra aggression here on the back of the Bibliomite, which never hurts. That 1 damage might add up over a couple turns and make the difference, helping you get there. 1 health can matter. I've won a lot of games with 1 health. So Bibliomite attacking there could make a difference. That said, it's not huge. I think adding survivability to this card, for instance, would have been a much bigger buff, making it harder for your opponent to kill. Adding that survivability, maybe getting an entire extra attack because it lived longer if it had, say, like 5 health. So a free bonus, it's never going to hurt, but I don't think is important as some of the other cards we've seen in this video. But still a nice freebie that helps shore up some of the weaknesses of this aggressive Demon Hunter package. Speaking of which, we're actually getting a card reverted as well for a more aggressive Demon Hunter decks. Battle-Worn Vanguard is going back to 2 health from 1. Remember this one got nerfed a while ago? Now it's going back to 2, and that's a really big change. There are all kinds of ping effects and whirlwind effects that dealt with Battle-Worn Vanguards and its Fell Wings in one fell swoop in the past. Now that does not happen. Battle-Worn Vanguard is a little bit harder to kill at 2 mana. This was a very powerful card in the past. I suspect it'll be a very powerful card again, and you can see this aggro Demon Hunter list shaping up rather nicely around all these changes. We also got another relic change for Demon Hunter as well, though. The Relic Vault, remember, got buffed. We talked about that a minute ago. And also the Relic of Extinction now is going to 1 mana instead of 2 mana. So now there's just like really nice little relic curve. You got this one for 1, the Vault for 2, the minion summons for 3, and then I guess a little bit of a gap to the big card draw card. But nonetheless, this early game seems like it's going to be a little bit smoother, easier to weave in things like hero powers alongside these cards as well, all of which are those incremental changes which can really help a card like this one get off the ground. So getting relics out faster was one of the big limitations of this deck that just felt too slow sometimes. Changes like this will definitely help that deck stay alive in the early game. This becomes a very efficient imp murderer, for instance. Beyond that, we're also getting a change here to Abyssal Depths for another archetype of Demon Hunter, potentially. Obviously, you can kind of fuse all these together in different ways, but Abyssal Depths is going from 4 mana to 3 mana, which is actually kind of crazy for things like Vandar Demon Hunter. That's a 4 mana card in a big Demon Hunter list. It can easily be the lowest cost, often is the lowest cost minion in your deck when you're building around Vandar. So now you have a very perfect turn 3 into turn 4 curve for big Vandar decks, and that seems to have a lot of potential actually for me. So keep an eye on Abyssal Depths. 1 mana cost may not seem like much in the scheme of things, but when it fits that specifically into that context so well, that might be a very powerful punch for Vandar decks indeed. And then finally for Demon Hunter, the Irebound Brute also getting its prior nerf reverted, going back to 7 mana. And yeah, this one's totally fine. This feels like I don't think it's going to make a big impact on any potentially viable archetypes in Demon Hunter. This thrive best in those like heavy card draw quest lists in particular. And the Irebound Brute, I don't really think is going to revive that sort of archetype. I don't think this is a big enough change for that to really come back and make a ton of sense. So this just feels like, you know, serving some justice back to the card. There was no reason for it to be 8 mana since that wasn't a powerful game plan any longer. So essentially, you know, just kind of a fine free change, I think, to make Irebound Brute feel a little bit better. So now let's move over to Warrior, also getting a bunch of changes. Up first, the Imbued Axe is getting 2 changes. Note that it's both getting a buff to its base buff. It's no longer +1/+1, it's now +1/+2, but also its infuse count is going down. It's only going to require 2 minions dying to fully infuse this back to +2/+2. So way better to baseline. That +2 health is a big deal on this. That's going to make this weapon really solid anyway. I think this is one of the stronger cards in the Enraged Warrior archetype. It hasn't been working well, but this card always feels really nice to play and get those buffs out. So getting extra health on your minions can go a very long way, of course. And then just getting the upgrade a little bit sooner. When that happens, that's a totally free bonus as well. So I think this is a great change for Imbued Axe. This definitely feels, again, like it could be one of the staple cards for this archetype if it becomes successful. We've also got Sanguine Depths going to +2 attack instead of +1 attack. This was one of the locations everybody was kind of like, what? When it came out, people weren't really convinced that it seemed all that powerful. And this is just a nice little buff. I actually think Sanguine Depths was better than I expected it to be at +1 attack. It was really the ping that felt like it mattered most when I was playing these decks. But certainly doubling that upside on the attack is going to go quite a ways for Sanguine Depths overall. So it can maybe lead to some additional aggression for these Enraged Warrior decks. And this is a really cool change I wasn't expecting to see. Slam, a staple classic Hearthstone card, is going down to 1 mana. And yeah, that feels so fitting. Slam just did not hold up or compete with modern day Hearthstone, but at 1 mana, I think this is actually a really intriguing card. It's number one, like a really flexible removal tool in a desperate moment. You need to kill a flame imp. Okay, I'll rip a Slam and I'll do that. But number 2, this can be a great activator for Enraged style decks. When you have, you know, the desire to hit your own minions with stuff, this becomes a very efficient way to do that while also cycling into some additional cards. And I think Enraged Warrior lacked card draw with something like Battle Rage not being available in the core set. Small changes like this might add up to really help that deck find more efficient ways to reload and while still achieving their goals of activating their enraged minions. So I like this change a lot. Speaking of other old school cards getting changed, the Cruel Taskmaster here is going to a 2/3 instead of a 2/2. So just a little bit better at, you know, vying for board in the early game. Play this alongside some other enrage activation card and, you know, boom, you've got a 2/3 instead of a 2/2. It's a small change, but these little things do tend to add up over the course of an entire deck. So maybe this is the difference from Cruel Taskmaster not seeing play to seeing play in an enraged deck. Also here, Bash is going from 3 mana to 2 mana. So yet another 2 mana deal 3 damage with some sort of upside card. And that definitely makes Bash feel more competitive with the likes of Mage and so on. We have so many of these different cards that are, you know, getting nice upsides for only 2 mana. And yeah, Bash, I think, was already an okay-ish card. It popped into things like Duels a lot, maybe not making the cut in Standard, but this just adds a little bit of extra efficiency. And I think you'll see this card pop into some control-y lists for sure, maybe even being utilized as a finisher for things like Enraged decks too. It's kind of like a Frostbolt. It can go face, of course, so keep an eye on that. And then Warrior's also getting a couple reversions. There were some really heavy-handed nerfs, if we remember recently, for Warrior, shutting down Control Warrior. I think they maybe only needed like 1 or 2 small changes, and instead Blizzard murdered every card in the archetype, including Tidal Revenant. That is getting reverted. He's going back to gaining 8 armor. So this was a solid card in Control Warrior decks. I don't think this will make the cut in many other lists, but if Control Warrior pops back up, I'm sure Tidal Revenant will make sense again in that world. Also, Shield Shatter is getting reverted. I think this is a much more notable change, going back to dealing 5 damage. I was surprised how often playing this in the nerf state it felt like that mattered. There's actually a surprising number of 5 health breakpoints out there to satisfy. So this is another great change. This, in combination with Tidal Revenant, some of these other changes, could be a way for Control Warrior to eke back into the meta, although I don't think this meta fits it quite as well as past ones. Definitely keep an eye on the archetype. I think these were all good, welcome reversions, but it really felt like From the Depths was the biggest problem card for Warrior in that past meta. So next up, we've got Paladin changes. The Countess here is getting a little bit of a change, not to herself, but her invitations are going from 3 mana to 2 mana. Which definitely helps. That feels like you can get the first invitation down a turn sooner, essentially going from a 10 mana turn to a 9 mana turn, but also it's just easier to play all of them at once. If you plop Countess on 7, on turn 8, you can squeeze 3 invitations in and still have some mana left over to do whatever other thing you're looking to do. Maybe play an equality or something on the same turn, right? So a little bit of additional mana flexibility, making these easier to weave into turns. All that's going to be a welcome change. I frankly do not think this is going to be enough for the Countess to really feel like a viable, super competitive card. I don't think this pulls pure Paladin out of the doldrums that it's currently in, but small changes like this might add up in the future as you get more and more Paladin cards, more stuff to put into that deck. This could be the difference from Countess making the cut and not, maybe not in this meta, but certainly in future metas. We've also got some Silverhand recruit stuff happening, and actually a lot of it. For instance, Promotion here, new card, is now going to give the minion Taunt as well as just the +3/+3. So yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually makes a big difference, I think, when you're trying to vie for early game board states. Sometimes that 4/4 can just get ignored by, like, you know, a few 1/1 imps or something. It just doesn't really contest wide boards that well. So by forcing your opponent's hand, sometimes this can help these stats get into play more immediately and make a bigger immediate impact as well. Not to mention when you stack this with other Silverhand recruit buffs like Sir Stewart's buff as well, suddenly you build some really big taunt minions, potentially like 7/7 taunted Silverhand recruits, and that can really force your opponent's hand hitting things they maybe don't really want to have to deal with too much. So this becomes this really flexible and perhaps now disruptive sort of buff that I think is pretty intriguing. And then this is a huge change, also along the same theme here. Warhorse Trainer's getting buffed. It's now going to give +2 attack to Silverhand recruits, and it's going to give them taunt. So again, really kind of turning this into this weird, you know, you don't want to call it a defensive deck necessarily, but certainly a deck that demands more board interaction, which could be cool for things like Infuse, for instance, just making sure you're killing off a bunch of Silverhand recruits. Setting up those payoffs, really slowing down more aggressive game plans, giving you time to recover, and in this case, maybe giving you some really nice value trades while protecting your Warhorse Trainer for a future reload turn as well. Because, for instance, look at this curve. A Stand Against Darkness is now going to be a 4-mana card. So if you play Warhorse Trainer, you kind of protect it behind a taunt or two that you've had lingering around, and then follow it up with another big board of taunts as well. You could certainly see some decks really being disrupted by that overall game plan. So, I mean, this is an enormous change. It's also, of course, just an aggressive follow-up finisher kind of card. This essentially becomes like a Savage Roar of sorts as well. Of course, it doesn't affect face, but if you got a big board of Silverhand recruits, this can just be that awesome finisher that secures lethal as well. This is a really big buff for a 3-drop. The stat line on this is premium. The effect on this is premium. Now, this suddenly looks like a really good card. And then SIT Stand Against Darkness, also here going to 4 mana. This is a much quicker reload for this deck. This actually feels really solid for Silverhand decks. I think at 5 mana, this was kind of slow and, you know, hard to work with. It felt like you weren't really doing enough or making enough immediate impact. But at 4 mana, it feels like it's getting under other decks just a little bit more, setting up for some big follow-ups as well. So I think the Silverhand recruit package is actually coming together rather nicely. I would definitely keep an eye on this deck for sure. And then finally, we have a few rogue changes here. Rogue seems to be getting a buff to card draw specifically. Silverleaf Poison is going from 2 mana to 1 mana. We also saw the change to Edwin. Remember, he got cheaper as well as a card draw tool. So this is a nice flexible way to get some additional card draw if you're running weapons in your deck. And sure, that always feels like a nice little freebie. 1 mana cards in particular in Rogue can be really useful to help set up combos. Cheap spells like this can be really nice to chain through things like Auctioneers and so on for these miracle sorts of decks. And this is one that you can load up preemptively as well, so you have card draw on demand, helping reload those hands as well for those miracle turns. All in all, I mean, I don't know if any particular deck right now is going to make room for Silverleaf Poison, but I think this becomes a much more viable option at 1 mana. And then this change, Sprint is now a 5 mana card. Sprint has gone from 7 to 6 and now from 6 to 5. And you know what? I kind of think this is halfway decent. Rogue already has some ways to discount spells, things like Preparation, the new Trickster card at 4 mana from Sunken City. And that might be a really nice way to reload some resources as needed. I mean, even hard casting this for 5, if you're just digging for some lethals in the late game, probably isn't going to feel like too bad of a play. So across those various ways to manipulate high cost spells, Sprint seems interesting. You could even use this perhaps in place with something like a Gadgetzan Auctioneer right now in these miracle lists. You know, usually that's drawing you more than 4 cards, but this is a little bit more immediate and you don't have to set up quite as much mana for that 6 mana start on the Auctioneer turn. So maybe running a couple of these instead of Auctioneers, just building a big hand off the bat might be better. We'll have to see how rogue lists fare, but 5 mana makes Sprint a much more interesting card, I think, than certainly 6 or 7. And wow, that wraps it up for the standard changes. There were also some Battlegrounds and Duels changes. I'm not going to run through all the Battleground stuff. I'll link the patch notes down in the description below if you want to read all the different Battlegrounds changes. I thought I would real quickly run through the Duel stuff. I didn't want to prep a bunch of graphics. A couple important changes though for Duels. Brittle Bones is now only going to target enemy minions, so you can't destroy your own stuff and benefit from it, which of course is a big change to the card. That means infinite loops like Defile, or that's not technically infinite, but pseudo infinite loops like Defile, chaining off your own Brittle Bones, that goes away. But also just a lot of symmetrical cards like Rankers and stuff get a lot worse with this effect, because now you're not getting extra ones when you're killing off your own Brittle Bone minions all the time. So really big nerf to Brittle Bones, I think. Kill Mox is an imp. It's kind of important for imp decks, I guess, but probably not a huge change. And then Darius Crowley is getting a sweep of buffs here. His Fire Hero power is going to go from 2 mana to 1 mana, and his Fire at the Hero power is going to be reduced from 3 to 2. I do not think those are enough to make Finley better, but it always did feel like his hero powers were not very powerful, and certainly taking a mana off doesn't hurt. And then finally, his Grizzled Reinforcement signature treasure, which is this one real quick just to show you, is going from 6 mana to 5 mana, so that certainly helps. That one felt really slow because the payoff on the cannons takes a long time. 6 mana is a big commitment. Frankly, I haven't played this in a while. I haven't seen a lot of people play it, but it could even be cheaper, I think. And then you have things like Brand that could have some really cool, interesting upsides, doubling battle cries and so on. So all in all, some good changes for Duels, helping out Darius and certainly hurting Brittle Bones. I'm welcoming that as someone who's lost to Defile shenanigans in the past. So that said, there are so many freaking changes in this patch. I think for sure Demon Hunter looks kind of scary to me. They got some great new aggressive tools, and frankly relics look better. Enraged Warrior looks like it could definitely get a nice little edge. You know, these buffs are also happening alongside nerfs to prominent decks as well. So as other things get weaker, there's even more rooms for these decks to succeed. I think Rogue got some really scary stuff. I think Halkias, I don't know if he's actually going to be any good. What do you guys think? Is he going to make the cut with his stealth? I think he becomes a lot more intriguing. I'm certainly going to have a lot more fun with this one, I know at least. But all in all, happy to see a lot of buffs. I think it's cool to try to bring up archetypes from the bottom, and I hope they work and don't swing the pendulum too far in their favor. But I'm really excited in particular to play a bunch more Enraged Warrior. I think this deck's really cool, and I'm excited to see if it can find more success in the new meta. That said, curious to hear what you guys think about all these nerfs. Share those thoughts in the comments down below. Check the description for the patch notes if you want to read those. And we'll be playing a lot of games with all these buffed cards very soon, so stay tuned for videos in the near future. But until then, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, game on.